Well, joining us now for his perspective on what we've seen, Devangshu Datta is a consultant editor of Outlook. He's been with me this afternoon going through all of this. Devangshu, thanks very much for joining us. One of the points that you were actually discussing with me was the lack of really hard numbers. There weren't terribly many numbers which came across in that speech. We'll get to budget estimates and the financial viability of the railways in a while, but would you say that Mamata Banerjee's focus this time around was squarely on the passenger?
Yes, at least she talked much more about the passenger. In reality, of course, approximately 70% of railway revenues comes from freight. So if she says she hasn't really fiddled around with freight rates and she hasn't changed freight classifications, I'd reckon that you can sort of work out the revenue numbers from there. The projection suggests that the railways doesn't expect this to be a great year. You're talking about 4 to 5% increase in volumes. So assuming that rates have not changed very much, you're talking about 4 to 5% increase in revenues as well. Factor that off against inflation, I guess we are still in the middle of a recession.
It's interesting that you would mention it because the manner in which he delivered the speech and the large extent of the focus on passenger amenities and the lack of mention, inadequate numbers perhaps, or adequate mention of numbers, it seemed that the performance of the railways, which has not been perhaps as good as a lot of people had expected, has been couched in all of this feel-good sense. Is that something that you got as well?
Yes, I suspect the last 6 months probably has been fairly bad. Like any transport service organization, it gets hit fairly hard when there is a recession, and unquestionably we have had a great slowdown, if not a recession. And I think that, yes, part of it was also soft pedaling the fact that probably revenues have not grown very much last year, and as she said herself, they are scaling down targets for the next this fiscal.
That's right. Freight rates are now she said that they needed more realistic rates. She said that they've been unable to meet those targets, but she said that took place because they were unrealistic to begin with. Some would question that rationale, but she did bring it down and said 882 million tons was the target in terms of the freight target. So that's been brought down. Is this realistically achievable now that we seem to have gone through the worst of this global recession? Which is arguable in itself.
The fiscal before, that is the 0708 fiscal, the railways did approximately 800 million tons. So you're talking roughly 10% growth over 2 years, roughly about 5% a year. If you're looking backwards from the turn of the century, from 2001, the railways has by and large been registering about 8-9% growth per year in terms of freight tonnage volumes. So I'd say, yeah, 4-5% is extremely achievable.